My name is Barbara Anderson. I'm 34 years old, and I balance books for a living. So believe me when I say I know, down to the penny, what 6 years of marriage cost me. On a Saturday in September, my husband's phone started ringing and would not stop because his mother was standing at a register at the mall with a cart full of things she hadn't paid for, holding his bank card, and the card had just been declined. My mother-in-law wasn't scared. She wasn't embarrassed. She was furious, and she called him to yell about it. He drove home ready to blame me. He'd had 6 years of practice. But what was waiting for him on our kitchen table? What I had built in the 48 hours before that call. None of them saw coming. Not him. Not her. Not anyone in my family. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet women tell the stories nobody believed until it was too late. If you have ever had to prove yourself in your own home, this one is for you. Drop a comment below, tell me where you're listening from, and be sure to subscribe because you won't want to miss how this one ends. To make sense of that kitchen table, I have to take you back 6 months, to March. I met Daniel Anderson when I was 27, at a fundraiser for the community college where I'd earned my first accounting credits. He was a construction project manager with sawdust on his sleeve and a habit of remembering small things. He remembered I liked my coffee bitter. He remembered my father's knee surgery. I mistook that for devotion, and to be fair, I just hadn't asked yet where all that devotion had been trained. We married when I was 28 and bought a tired little house in Kettering, outside Dayton, Ohio. I loved that house the way you love a rescue dog. I sanded its floors on my knees. I repainted the kitchen twice because the first yellow looked like caution tape. I built us a budget the way I build everything, in neat columns, because I'm a senior accountant at a parts manufacturer, and columns are how I stay calm. My dad fixed roofs. My mom ran a register at a grocery store for 30 years. Nobody handed me anything, and I never minded that. You trust what you built yourself, and I trusted our life. Daniel used to sit on the porch steps while I did the monthly numbers, and he'd say, "Marry an accountant. Sleep like a baby." For a while, that was true. We slept fine. The numbers behaved. But I'll tell you something they don't teach you in any bookkeeping course. Every ledger has a line where the numbers stop adding up, no matter how careful you are. It took me 6 years to accept that ours did too, and that the line had a name on it. The name was Lorraine. My mother-in-law was 63, widowed 8 years, and she lived 15 minutes away in the old family house where Daniel grew up. If you met her at church, you'd think she was the warmest woman in Montgomery County. She brought casseroles to strangers. She remembered every birthday in the congregation. Then she'd come to my house on a Sunday, walk into my kitchen, and rearrange my cabinets while I stood there holding a dish towel. "Mugs by the stove, Barbara," she'd say. "That's how a kitchen works." She never raised her voice. She just corrected my life the way you'd correct a child's homework patiently, in pen. She called my husband my Danny, always with the "my" in front, like a brand burned on a calf. And she had a key to our house. Daniel gave it to her before our wedding. "A spare key on a red ribbon, for emergencies," he said. I want you to notice something about Lorraine's emergencies, because it took me longer than it should have. There was the emergency of the dripping faucet discovered on a Tuesday afternoon, the emergency of the package on the porch, a Friday, the emergency of checking whether we'd left the oven on, which we had not, another Tuesday. Every single one of her emergencies happened between 9 and 5, on days when Daniel was on a job site and I was at the office. Not once did an emergency strike while either of us was home. I mentioned that pattern to Daniel once, lightly, the way you test ice before you put your weight on it. He laughed and kissed my forehead. "That's just Mom," he said. The ice held that day. I made a note of the crack anyway. The first number that lied to me showed up in March, in the joint checking account. I reconcile our accounts on the first Sunday of every month. Coffee on the left, laptop in front, receipts on the right. That Sunday there was a cash withdrawal I didn't recognize, made on a Friday afternoon at a branch across town, $180. Not a fortune. Just wrong. Here's what people don't understand about accountants. We don't panic at a wrong number. We get quiet. I checked it 3 times. I pulled the receipts twice. I went through my own wallet like a customs agent because I have been trained my whole life to assume the error is mine until proven otherwise. It wasn't mine. So I asked Daniel, and I kept my voice easy, the way you'd ask about weather. He answered fast. Too fast, like a man stepping over a puddle he already knew was there. I gave Mom a little for her prescriptions, he said. She didn't want to bother you. I nodded and let it go that night. And then, because I can't help myself, I looked at the number again on Monday. Prescriptions come in amounts. Copays are $20, $45, maybe $90 for the brand name ones. Pharmacies print receipts. His mother's emergency medicine had somehow cost $180 even, in cash, at a bank branch 2 blocks from her hairdresser, at an hour when Daniel had been pouring concrete in Beaver Creek with 12 men watching. The math didn't match the story. When a number and a story disagree, one of them is lying, and in 12 years of audits I have never once caught a number in a lie. I closed the laptop. I started paying attention. In April it happened again. $240 this time. Same branch, same Friday pattern, and this time I didn't ask easy. I printed the statement and set it on the counter next to his dinner, which is the closest thing an accountant has to a declaration of war. Daniel looked at the highlighted line for a long moment, and then my husband, the man who watched me find a 9-cent error in a client's books and celebrate like it was a playoff win, said, "Did you miscount?" I want to be honest about what that question did. I've been called stubborn. I've been called cold, mostly by people who wanted something from me. But no one had ever suggested I couldn't count. It was the one thing about me that had never been up for debate. The skill I'd built my whole life on, and he reached for it first, before he reached for the truth. Because the truth was standing in his mother's kitchen frosting a cake. I didn't yell. I asked him to sit down, and I laid it out like a quarterly review. If your mother needs help, I said, we help her. On the books, planned, both of us signing off. And the key comes back. She doesn't get to be in our house when we're not in it. He rubbed his face with both hands, and out came the sentence I would hear so many times I could have had it engraved. She's my mother. What am I supposed to do? He said it like a man showing me his empty pockets. But he promised. He'd get the key back that weekend, he said. He'd talk to her. I marked it in my head the way I mark a pending transaction. Promised, not posted. Lorraine's birthday dinner was the last Sunday in April. 14 people around the long table in the house where Daniel grew up. She was radiant that night, telling stories about the family. And I noticed, the way you notice a draft, that I did not exist in a single pronoun. It was always we drove to the lake, my kids and me, our family, this house. 6 years in, and I was furniture. Then her sister asked, sweetly, whether Barbara might host Thanksgiving this year, and the table went just quiet enough. Lorraine smiled at me, patted my hand, twice, soft as a stamp coming down on a form, and said, "Oh, honey, you're not family, dear. You're just who he married." She said it with sugar on it. That's the part people never believe, that a sentence like that can be served warm, like pie, and a whole table will laugh because the tone told them it was a joke, even though every woman in that room heard exactly what it was. I laugh too. I'm not proud of that. You laugh because the alternative is standing up at a birthday dinner and becoming the villain of a story that has already been written and captioned without you. Daniel laughed with his mouth full and squeezed my knee under the table, which I believe he genuinely thought was loyalty. Only one person at that table didn't laugh. Susan, Daniel's younger sister, in from Columbus, sat very still with her fork halfway down and looked at me for a long time, the way you look at someone standing on train tracks. I didn't understand that look yet. I filed it, the way I file everything. It would take until September for that particular receipt to make sense. In May, I did the thing you're supposed to do, the calm, boring, adult thing. I opened an account in my own name at a different bank and moved my direct deposit into it. I didn't hide it. I told Daniel at the kitchen table with the paperwork in front of us, and I kept my share flowing into the joint account for the mortgage, the utilities, the insurance. Every bill got paid, to the dollar, same as always. I wasn't taking money out of the marriage. I was putting a door on my half of it. You'd have thought I'd filed for divorce that afternoon. Daniel went quiet in the way that meant he'd already talked to his mother, and within a week, Lorraine had a new name for me. She debuted it at a cookout, to a cousin, in that carrying voice she saved for things she wanted overheard. "Well, you know how it is now," she said. "Danny works himself to the bone and the wife hides money." The wife. I stood 10 feet away holding a bowl of potato salad I had made from her recipe, because I was still trying then. And I understood something with the kind of clarity that usually only comes off a spreadsheet. In this family, there was no move I could make that would read as self-respect. Protecting myself was theft. Asking questions was disrespect. Even my paycheck, the one I earned before I ever met her son, was family property that I was withholding. Those were the rules, and nobody had voted on them, and nobody was going to. I drove home that night, my own house, 15 minutes, and I remember thinking, with a strange calm, that rules nobody voted on are the easiest ones to stop obeying. June, believe it or not, was almost sweet. The withdrawals paused. Lorraine cooled off, or seemed to. And then a package walked off our porch. A set of drill bits Daniel had ordered, gone in broad daylight, the second theft on our street that month according to the neighborhood group. Daniel was furious in the uncomplicated way men get about tools, and when I suggested a doorbell camera, he agreed before I finished the sentence. "I want that on the record." The camera was his idea as much as mine, bought to catch a porch pirate, installed on a Saturday with him whistling on the ladder and me handing up screws. For a few weeks, our house felt like ours. We cooked. We drove out to the lake on a Sunday instead of going to dinner at his mother's, and the sky did not fall. I let myself do the dangerous thing, the thing careful women ration like sugar. I hoped. I made him his grandmother's meatloaf as a peace offering, and we ate it on the porch under our new little camera, and he held my hand and said, "We were okay." I ran the numbers that night, and they balanced, and I chose to believe the ledger and the man at the same time. Here's what I know now. The camera was supposed to catch a porch thief. It caught my marriage instead. Let me pause right here for 1 second. If you have ever sat at your own kitchen table feeling like a guest in your own house, tell me in the comments where you're listening from, because I read them. And it helps more women than you'd think. And if you know that feeling of checking a number 3 times because nobody ever checks on you, go ahead and subscribe. The next part of this story is where the numbers stopped lying to me and started testifying. July ended the truce. The withdrawals came back, smaller and smarter, like they'd been to a seminar. $310 from a branch near the mall, $150 in cash back at a grocery store. $95 here, $410 there, the boldest one yet. Little cuts, spread out, the kind a busy couple wouldn't notice, except one half of this couple reconciles accounts for a living and had started keeping a private tracking sheet in a folder that lived in my work bag, not on the kitchen counter. I logged each one. Date, time, location, amount, and whose story was attached to it, because there was always a story. Daniel needed cash for the crew lunch. Mom's water heater. "It's from my overtime, Barb. Why are you like this?" I stopped asking out loud and let the sheet do the asking. By the first week of August, the pattern was so clean it was almost beautiful, the way fraud always is right before it's caught. Every unexplained transaction fell on a Tuesday or a Friday, the 2 days Daniel's crew ran late pours, and I closed the month-end books at the office. The 2 days our house stood empty from 9 to 6, guaranteed, like a posted schedule. Now, banks flag patterns like that with software. Wives flag them with a highlighter at midnight, alone, feeling like a crazy person for auditing their own life. The running total crossed $1,000 that month. I sat with the sheet in front of me and made myself say the quiet part in my own head. This isn't leaking. This is scheduled. Somebody with a key and a calendar was drawing a salary from my marriage. The cash came out of machines with a card and a pin, and Daniel's pin, I'd teased him about it for years, was his mother's birthday. I just couldn't prove who was picking the lock, because whoever it was never used the front door while the camera. And then I stopped. The camera. We'd had that camera almost 6 weeks, and I had never once scrolled its history, because we bought it to catch strangers, and it dutifully alerted us about delivery drivers and one very committed raccoon. Until the raccoon won, and I silenced the notifications back in July. But the app keeps everything for 60 days. So on a Wednesday night in August, with Daniel asleep upstairs, I sat in the dark kitchen and went backward through the footage like an auditor going back through a fiscal year. It took me 40 minutes to find it. Tuesday. 14 minutes past 2 in the afternoon. A silver sedan I knew as well as my own car pulls into our driveway, calm as a mail truck. Lorraine gets out. She's carrying her purse and wearing the good lavender cardigan, church quality, and she walks up our steps like a woman with an appointment. Then she takes out a key on a red ribbon, the very key Daniel swore to me he'd taken back from her in April, and I actually watched. My mother-in-law let herself into my locked house at 2 in the afternoon while both of us were at work. No knock, no call. The door just closed behind her. Polite as you please. I sat there in my dark kitchen watching the timestamp run. 5 minutes, 15, 30. At 2:54 she came back out, pulled the door shut, checked the handle like a professional, and drove away. 40 minutes inside my home. And here is the detail that kept me up until 3, the one I turned over and over like a bad invoice. She came out carrying nothing. No casserole dish she'd dropped off. No package she'd rescued. Empty hands. So what, exactly, does a woman do alone in your house for 40 minutes? The next evening, I told Daniel I had a headache, skipped his crew's softball game, and searched my own house like I was executing a warrant on my own life. You have to understand. Nothing was missing. That's why it worked for so long. Missing gets noticed. Moved gets doubted. In our bedroom, my nightstand drawer sat a half-inch prouder than I leave it, and I leave it flush, because I'm the kind of person who leaves drawers flush. The file tote in the closet where I keep our tax returns had its folders leaning left. I keep them leaning right. In my desk, the envelope from my new bank, my personal account, the statement addressed to Barbara Anderson only, had been opened and glued shut again, just slightly proud along the flap, the way paper never lies flat twice. She knew. She'd read my balance. And on my dresser, my perfume, the good one Daniel bought me in Chicago, stood with its cap seated crooked, a quarter turn loose, and the level lower than I remembered. She hadn't stolen it. She'd used it. Worn me around the house, or around town, like a coat she was thinking of buying. I didn't touch anything after that. I got my phone and photographed every drawer, every folder, every flap, with the date stamped in the corner, and I wrote it all into the tracking sheet with the same steady hands I use for other people's audits, because that's what my hands know how to do when the rest of me is shaking. Then I sat on the edge of my own bed like a guest in a hotel, and I understood her. Lorraine wasn't searching for anything. She was taking inventory. Of the assets. Of the paperwork. Of the marriage. I showed Daniel the footage on a Sunday morning, before coffee, because I wanted his real face and not his rehearsed one. I got both. For 3 full seconds, watching his mother let herself into our house with a key that wasn't supposed to exist, my husband looked exactly as sick as he should have. I saw it. That's what made everything after worse, knowing he saw it too. Then the shutters came down and he said, and I am quoting him precisely, "She was probably just watering the plants. We do not own a single house plant." I pointed this out. He said maybe she'd dropped something off. I showed him her empty hands. He said there had to be an explanation, which was the first true thing he'd said. And then he went and got one. He called her. Right there. On speaker. And his mother turned on the tears like a faucet with good pressure. Sobbing that she'd felt so far from him lately. That Barbara was building walls. That she'd only wanted to feel close to her family. and now she was being treated like a criminal. He was apologizing to her before she finished the second sentence. To her. She's my mother, he told me afterward, wrung out on the couch like he was the one who'd been burgled. What am I supposed to do? And that might have been the morning I still could have been talked down, if it had ended there. It didn't. By Wednesday, 2 women from her church had reached out to Daniel to say they were praying for him, because they'd heard things were hard at home with his cold wife. She'd been robbed on Sunday, according to her. By Wednesday, she was the victim. Here's the part I'm least proud of, so let's get it over with. After that Sunday, I doubled down on the one strategy that had never once worked. I decided I didn't have enough proof. You have to laugh. A little. I had a spreadsheet with a 4-figure total. I had timestamps, photographs, footage of an unauthorized entry with a key that officially didn't exist. Any auditor on Earth would have closed the file and issued findings. But I wasn't auditing a company. I was pleading with a jury of 1 man, and every time the verdict came back, she's my mother, I concluded the problem was my evidence and went looking for more. That's the trap they don't warn you about when you're a careful woman. You're not family, dear, Lorraine had told me at that birthday table, sweet as pie filling. You're just who he married. I'd hear that sentence in my head at night while I highlighted statements, and instead of hearing what it meant, the case is closed, the verdict came pre-printed. I treated it like a challenge. I'd out-document her. When the file was thick enough, he'd have to see. So in the middle of all that, I did one small thing that felt like nothing at the time. I was updating our account alerts online, and I flipped Daniel's debit card over, and on the back, in blue ink smaller than a fortune cookie, was the bank's fraud line, available around the clock. I copied that phone number into my tracking sheet, top corner, the way you note an emergency exit in a building you don't trust. I didn't have a plan for it. I want that understood. I just wrote it down. Accountants don't throw away numbers. Sometimes the numbers wait for you. The second Saturday in August, I drove to the office supply store for printer ink, and I came home with a gray fireproof lockbox, the kind you buy for passports and birth certificates. Steel, 2 keys, small enough to carry and heavy enough to mean it. I hadn't planned to buy it. I stood in that aisle a long time. Buying a safe for your marriage certificate is one thing. Buying a safe because your mother-in-law reads your mail inside your own house, that's a different purchase. And both of us in that aisle knew it. Me and the woman I was about to become. Into the box went the tracking sheet. The photographs, printed. A flash drive with every clip of camera footage, labeled by date in my blocky audit handwriting. Copies of the bank statements with the withdrawals marked. My passport, while I was at it. Then I did the part that still tells you everything about where my marriage stood in August. I didn't put the box in the closet or the desk or anywhere inside the house my husband and I owned together. I put it in the trunk of my car, under the spare tire cover, because my car was titled in my name alone, and it was the one lockable space in my entire life that Lorraine Anderson did not have a key to. I stood in my own garage with my hand flat on the closed trunk, and I said something out loud, alone, that I have never said in quite the same way since. For 6 years, I kept records to be believed. Nobody believed me anyway. So from now on, I wasn't keeping records to be believed. I was keeping them to be free. The box went everywhere I went after that. I want to tell you my own mother rode in like the cavalry when I finally told her some of it. I drove out to see her in late August, sat at the same kitchen table where I'd done my homework as a kid, and gave her the medium-sized version, the withdrawals, the key, the crying phone calls. My mom, Ruth, is 61 years old, and she loves me more than her own lungs, and here is what she said. She reached across the table, patted my hand, and told me, "Endure it, honey. Men love their mothers. Don't make him choose, because you might not like what he picks." Then she got up to refill my coffee like she'd handed me a recipe. I sat there, and I finally saw it. The whole assembly line. Her mother-in-law had picked apart her housekeeping for 20 years, and my father never said a word, and my mother called that keeping the peace. Her own mother had handed her paycheck to my grandfather every Friday of her working life and called that how it was done. Endure it. Honey wasn't advice. It was an heirloom. It was the same red ribbon key, passed down mother to daughter, to a house where we were permanent guests. And I understood something else, sitting there. Something that reorganized my whole childhood in about 4 seconds. I didn't learn bookkeeping in night classes. I learned it watching women like her count everything they weren't allowed to keep. Grocery envelopes, babysitting cash, the emergency 20 folded into a coat pocket. Women in my family have always kept a second set of books. I was just the first one with a career and a lockbox. I drove home, and I did not take her advice. Now, before you decide Daniel was a cardboard villain, I need you to sit with me in the parking lot of a counselor's office on the last Thursday in August, because I was there, and it complicates things, and true stories are complicated. He agreed to marriage counseling. He found the counselor himself, a calm woman named Dr. Novak, with an office full of tissues and rubber plants, and in that first session, my husband said things I'd waited 6 years to hear. He said, "I think I disappear when my mom is upset." He said, "Barbara handles everything and I've been letting her." He held my hand on the ugly beige couch, and his hand was shaking, and I looked at this big gentle man who builds things for a living, and I remembered exactly why I married him. Afterward, I sat in my car in the parking lot and cried for 10 minutes, and I want to be accurate about those tears. They weren't grief. They were relief, which is so much more dangerous, because relief is the down payment hope makes right before it buys the whole house. I let myself picture it. The version where he wakes up, the locks get changed, and in 5 years this is a story we tell carefully at dinner parties. Then I looked over at the passenger seat where his phone sat charging, because he'd run back inside to book the next session. The screen lit up. Mom, with a heart next to it, and under her name, 7 missed calls. 7. During one single hour, the first hour in 6 years that her son had spent working on his own marriage. I sat very still. Somewhere across town an alarm had gone off, and I was married to the snooze button. The first week of September, Susan called me from Columbus. Daniel's little sister and I had always been friendly at a careful distance, 2 women who liked each other across a minefield neither of us had planted. This call was different. She skipped hello. "Barbara," she said, "I need you to hear this from me first. Mom's been on the phone with the aunts all week. She's telling everyone you're stepping out on Danny, that the separate bank account is for sneaking around, that she has a feeling." I stood in my kitchen with a wooden spoon in my hand and the sauce going cold, and honestly, the accusation itself barely landed. It was so lazy, so off the shelf. What landed was the machinery underneath it. I finally saw the sequence the way you see a scheme laid out in a fraud case, step by step. She wasn't gossiping, she was pre-drafting the story of my divorce, assigning me the villain part in advance, so that when everything came apart, the family would already know whose fault it was. The woman was seeding a narrative months ahead of the crime. It was, professionally speaking, immaculate work. Susan's voice dropped then, and she said the thing that kept me staring at the ceiling that night. "Barbara, you're not the first. This is what she does. It's what was done." And then she stopped herself. Hard, like a woman grabbing a door before it slams. "Ask her about 1989 sometime," she said. "Or don't. Just, whatever you're keeping in that careful head of yours, keep keeping it." And she hung up before I could ask a single question, leaving me alone in my kitchen with cold sauce, a burning curiosity, and the number 1989. Our third counseling session never happened. We were in the driveway, keys in Daniel's hand, when his phone rang, and it was a neighbor of Lorraine's. "Mom's having chest pains, she's asking for you. And look, you drop everything for that." Even I dropped everything for that. We spent 4 hours at the emergency room, where the doctors ran every test cardiology has to offer, and found a heart in better shape than mine, and discharged her by early evening with a diagnosis of anxiety and a printout about stress. By 7 she was home. By 8, and I saw this with my own eyes because we drove her home, she was on her feet in her kitchen, rosy as a peach, boxing up lemon bars for the neighbors who'd been so worried. She caught me watching her and she smiled at me over the wax paper, and I promise you, that smile had a punchline in it. It was the third time in 6 years that a medical emergency had landed on the exact evening Daniel and I had something of our own. Our anniversary trip, a job interview dinner of mine, and now the counselor. Twice is coincidence. 3 times is a calendar. In the car, Daniel said it before I could even open my mouth. Quietly. To the windshield. She's my mother. What am I supposed to do? And this time, I didn't answer. I looked out the window at the strip malls going by and said absolutely nothing, all the way home, and he mistook that for peace. People think the dangerous moment is when a woman starts yelling. It's when she stops. Let me pause one more time, briefly. If a man has ever handed you his silence and called it peace, you know exactly where I was standing that night. Comment the quiet part if you've been there, and subscribe, because what I built in the next 6 weeks, in total silence, nobody in that family saw coming. Karen Whitfield's office was above a bakery downtown, which meant the most painful hour of my adult life smelled like cinnamon. She was 51, silver-bobbed, with reading glasses she used mostly for pointing. A paralegal friend from my community college days had given me her name back in August. Just in case, she'd said. And I'd sat on it for weeks like a woman holding a fire extinguisher and insisting she smelled nothing. That Monday, I carried the gray box up the stairs. Karen's greeting, word for word, was, "Fair warning, I'm expensive and I don't do pep talks. Bring me paper, not feelings." So I opened the box and gave her paper. The tracking sheet with every flagged transaction. The photographs of the resealed envelope. The footage log. 9 entries into our house in 4 months. Time-stamped. None of them with permission. Most of them lasting over half an hour. She went through it without a single change of expression, like a woman doing a crossword she'd done before, and when she finished she took off the reading glasses, looked at me, and delivered the sentence I'd been dodging since March. "Mrs. Anderson, in 20 years of family law, I've had maybe 5 clients walk in this prepared. You don't need more evidence. You need a decision." I started to explain about Daniel, the counseling, the almost. Karen held up one hand, not unkindly, and glanced at the gray box. "Honey," she said, "women who are staying don't keep the file in the trunk of the car." I looked at that box on her desk. Steel, organized, portable, ready to leave at all times, and understood that some part of me had made the decision back in that office supply aisle. The rest of me was just late to the meeting. I didn't sign anything that Monday. Karen drafted the petition and I asked her to hold it, because there was one thing left I owed myself. Not him, myself, so that whatever happened next, I would never lie awake wondering. Thursday night I made pot roast, and after dinner I put both hands flat on the table and made it as small and as easy as a request can possibly be made. "Daniel," I said, "I'm asking for one thing. Not therapy, not choosing sides, not a single word to your mother about any of it. Change the locks with me this weekend, that's all. 2 new locks, $60, one afternoon. Whoever needs a key gets one from us, going forward. It is the most normal thing in the world." I watched my husband look at me, and I want to believe some part of him was doing the math and seeing the whole board. The file he pretended I wasn't keeping. The silence he'd been calling peace. The wife he could feel packing herself up somewhere behind her own eyes. He looked at me for a long, long time, and then Daniel Anderson, 36 years old, 6 feet of him, a man who signs off on structural steel, said, "Let me just run it by Mom first, so she doesn't take it wrong." I said, "Okay." The way a doctor says okay when the scan comes back and there's nothing more medicine can do. He heard agreement. It was actually a time of death. I cleared the plates, kissed him on the cheek, told him I was tired, and went up to bed, where I lay in the dark doing what I do best. Closing the books on the fiscal year. He ran it by Mom. Of course, running it by Mom meant Lorraine was in my living room by 5 o'clock the next evening, uninvited, red ribbon key visible in her fist like a crucifix at an exorcism, delivering a performance I can only call award-worthy. She cried standing up. She cried sitting down. She asked Daniel, never me, I was scenery, how he could let that woman lock his own mother out of the family. She'd buried a husband, she said. Was she supposed to bury her son too? One deadbolt at a time? It was masterful, and I mean that technically. Every sentence turned a hardware store errand into a funeral. And Daniel folded. I watched it happen in real time, the spine going out of him vertebra by vertebra, until he was rubbing her back and saying, "Nobody's locking anyone out of anything, Mom." And the lock conversation died in my living room without a vote, the way everything in that family died without a vote. Lorraine left victorious about 6 o'clock, dabbing her eyes, accepting Daniel's arm down the front steps. And here I have to thank the porch pirate who stole those drill bits back in June, because our doorbell camera sees the whole porch, in high definition, with sound. That night I watched the footage of her exit. The door closes behind her. Daniel's arm withdraws. And the moment, the exact frame, that door clicks shut. My mother-in-law stops crying, like a tap shut off. No taper, no sniffle. She checks her reflection in our storm door, fixes one piece of hair, and walks to her sedan smiling, a workman leaving a job site satisfied. I clipped that footage, labeled it, and filed it in the gray box. Exhibit 12. Saturday morning, I told Daniel I had a hair appointment, and I did have one, for the record. I just also had a 9:30 at Karen Whitfield's office first. She laid the petition for divorce on the desk with a pen across it, and I'm going to be honest with you about that moment. Because this channel is not a movie. My hands did not tremble. There was no swelling music. Signing felt like the last hour of a long audit, when the findings are typed, and all that's left is your signature on work you've already checked 3 times. The marriage hadn't ended at that desk. It ended in a driveway, in a living room, in 100 small verdicts that all came back the same. This was just the filing. Karen explained the mechanics in her flat, comforting way. The papers would wait, signed and ready. Nothing would be served until I said the word. If I said the word. Some clients, she said, sit at this exact stage for a year. I asked what most of them were waiting for. She looked at me over the pointing glasses and said, "Same thing you are." A moment so undeniable that nobody, including them, can argue with it. Then she added, quieter. They always get one. People like your mother-in-law can't help themselves. Escalation is the only gear they have. I drove home with the trunk of my car heavier than any trunk has a right to feel, and I started, quietly, packing my life for portability. A few clothes to my gym locker, documents to the box, my grandmother's ring, out of the jewelry stand on my dresser and onto my hand, where it stayed. I didn't know what ready would look like. The Andersons were about to decide for me. It was a Friday in the middle of September when the camera caught the last entry. I was closing month-end at the office when my phone buzzed, motion at the front door. I'd turned every alert back on in August, and there was the silver sedan, 1:45 in the afternoon, right on schedule. Lorraine let herself in with the red ribbon key. This visit was different, though. 6 minutes, in and out. No wandering. She walked in like a woman who knew exactly what she'd come for, and she walked out with her right hand closed around something small, and got in her car, and drove off. I sat in my cubicle and replayed those 6 minutes maybe 10 times. That night, Daniel tore apart the bedroom looking for his debit card. Drawer out, wallet emptied, pockets padded, the whole choreography, and then he stood in the doorway and asked me, with 6 years of reflex behind it, "Barb, where'd you put my card?" There it was. The default setting. One last time. I looked at my husband and I gave him one door, held wide open. "Check the camera," I said. He stared at me. He knew what I meant. He wasn't stupid. He was loyal, which turned out to be so much worse. And I watched him decide, in real time, not to look, because a man can't unsee footage, and he turned and said he'd probably left it in his truck. He went to bed instead. Saturday morning, 7:40, I sat in my parked car outside the bank with my tracking sheet and called the fraud line from the top corner of the page. A kind, tired-sounding woman named Denise took my report. Joint account, co-owner, card not in the account holder's possession, a documented pattern of unauthorized transactions since March. "The card is now flagged as stolen," she said. "Any attempt to use it will decline. Is there anything else? Yes, I said. One thing. What do you need from me for the bank's investigation? And Denise said the sentence that set the whole last act of my marriage in motion. For a known suspect, we'll need a police report. I filed it that same morning. The officer at the front desk, a patient man named Kowalski, took my statement, my printed screenshots, my footage stills, and typed for a long time. When he got to the field for suspect information, he asked the question out loud, routine as a toll booth. Name of the person you believe took the card? And I heard my own voice, level as a bubble in a spirit gauge, say, Lorraine Anderson. My mother-in-law. There is no unsaying that. A police report with a name in it doesn't get quietly lost the way family arguments do. It exists. Stamped. Numbered. Public record. Forever. I signed it and walked out into the parking lot, lighter and heavier at the same time, and that's when Susan called. She'd heard about the church rumors going nuclear, wanted to warn me again, and instead, standing by my car, I finally asked, Susan, what happened in 1989? She was quiet a moment. Then she told me. In 1989, Lorraine was a 26-year-old newlywed, and her mother-in-law, Grandma Anderson, a woman I'd only ever seen framed in the hallway, stern above a Bible, required Lorraine's entire paycheck from the dental office in its envelope every Friday for the household. For 10 years, that woman never once called Lorraine by her name. She called her the girl Gerald married. Dad told me once, Susan said, that Mom used to cry behind the church after services, where no one could see. Then Susan sighed, tired all the way from Columbus. My mother didn't invent these rules, Barbara. She's the best student they ever had. Nobody ever broke them for her. I stood in that parking lot, and I felt the thing I'd been fighting off for months. I felt sorry for Lorraine. It changed nothing. Somebody in this family was finally going to flunk out, and it was going to be me, on purpose. Daniel left for the job site at 8 that Saturday morning. A weekend poor. Back by 3, he said, and kissed my cheek on the way out, and I let him. And I'm still not sure what that kiss was. Goodbye, probably. He still thought his card was in his truck. I had until roughly lunchtime if I knew Lorraine's Saturday routine, and I knew Lorraine's Saturday routine better than she knew there was a camera on my porch. So I set my kitchen table for the last time, not with dishes. I brought the gray box in from the trunk and laid it all out the way I'd present findings to a board. Clear zip bags, the heavy kind. One item to a bag, each with a white label in my blocky handwriting. Bank statements, March through September, discrepancies highlighted. Photographs of my resealed mail. The footage log, printed, 9 entries. The flash drive. A bag holding one loose brass key. The key Daniel had theatrically handed back to me in April, which a locksmith friend confirmed was a fresh copy, while the original stayed on its red ribbon in his mother's purse. Not official evidence bags, nothing pretend about them, just organized, which frankly has always been scarier than official. In the center of the table, the petition, signed, with Karen's card clipped to the front. Beside it, the pen, laid crosswise, the way you leave a pen for someone else. And the tablet, propped, cued to Friday's footage, paused on a silver frame of Lorraine at my front door. Then I made a pot of tea I had no plans to drink, because my hands wanted a job, and I sat down in my quiet house to wait for the Andersons to be themselves. At 11:51, Daniel's phone number lit up my screen. It had started. I heard the whole thing later from 3 different sources, the way you piece together an incident report, and every version agreed on the essentials. Lorraine spent that Saturday morning at the Green, 10 minutes from her house, and she shopped like a woman who'd been given a bonus. A department store cart, filled without checking a single price tag, sweaters and shoes and a stand mixer in a box, more than $2,000 of it piled onto the belt while a line formed behind her. Then she tapped my husband's debit card, breezy as a duchess. Declined. She frowned at the machine. The cashier told the story later, like the machine had been rude to her. Tried again. Declined. Asked the cashier to run it manually, and by now the line behind her was watching. The way lines do. Declined. Card flagged. Please contact your bank. And here is everything you need to know about my mother-in-law. The single detail I would frame if you could frame a moment. She was not afraid. A woman caught at a register with somebody else's flagged card, and it never once entered her mind that she was in trouble. Because in her world, that card wasn't stolen. It was family property. And she was family. And I was the outsider with the nerve to put doors on things. So she did not slip quietly out to the parking lot. She stood at that register, in front of the entire line, and called her son at top volume to yell about the humiliation his useless bank had put her through, and demanded he fix it immediately. She confessed, loudly, in public, to a store full of witnesses, and she thought she was the victim. I could not have scripted her better. Daniel called me from the truck at 11:51, and I let it ring out on the table next to the tea. He called again at noon. Again at 12:10. I imagine that drive from the job site, 25 minutes with his mother in one ear swearing she'd only borrowed the card for a few things. There it was at last. The confession, casual as a weather report, and a wife, who wasn't answering, in the other. He'd have started assembling the usual case against me somewhere around the bypass. Barbara froze the account. Barbara embarrassed his mother. Barbara and her spreadsheets. 6 years of practice. The reflex knew the way home by itself. His truck hit the driveway hard at 12:31. I heard the door, and my husband came through that kitchen doorway already loaded, red-faced, phone still in his hand, and got as far as, "Barbara, what did you do to the ACC?" And then the room reached him. I watched it happen from my chair, both hands around a cold mug. I watched him see the table, the zip bags in their neat rows, labeled in handwriting he's watched balance our life for 6 years. The highlighted statements. The red ribbon, alone in its bag, like something recovered from a crash site. The petition in the center with the pen laid across it, and the word divorce, in bold at the top of a court caption with his own name in it. And the tablet, propped upright, paused on a crystal-clear frame of his mother at our front door, key in hand, time-stamped the day before. The anger left him like air from a cut tire. He looked at me, and there was a question in his face, and it wasn't any version of "what did you do?" It was 6 years too late, and it was, for the first time, the right question. I didn't answer it. I nodded at the tablet, and I said the only thing I'd rehearsed. "Press play." He pressed play. He watched his mother let herself into our house, watched her walk out with her hand closed around his card, and before the clip even finished, headlights swung across the kitchen window. The silver sedan, screeching into our driveway, because of course she'd followed him from the mall's direction, and of course she didn't knock. The red ribbon key came through my front door one last time. Lorraine blew into that kitchen mid-sentence, already narrating her own martyrdom, that useless bank, the humiliation, tell your wife to fix. And then she saw the table, and I watched her run the same math Daniel had run except faster, because she'd always been the smarter of the two. Her eyes went from the bags to the statements to the tablet, where her own image stood frozen at our front door. And she pivoted. I've testified in fraud hearings, and I have never seen anything that smooth. Tears, instantly, on tap. "Danny," she quavered, "I only borrowed it. For a few little things. I was going to pay it back. You know I would never." I let her finish. Then calmly, the way I walk a board through quarterly findings, I stood and went down the row of bags, one by one. March, $180. April, $240. The envelope from my bank steamed and resealed. 9 entries in 4 months, and the dates, recited from memory, because I am always going to be the woman who knows the numbers. Then I lifted the last page, the copy with the case number stamped on it, and read her the line I already knew by heart. "Known suspect," it says, "Lorraine Anderson." Her tears shut off. I finally got to see the tap turn in person, and she looked at me with the pure, undiluted thing beneath all that sugar, and hissed, "You would do this to family?" And there it was. The door she'd built, held open for me at last. I said, "You were right, Lorraine. I was just who he married. As of today, I'm not even that." Then she turned to her son to collect her rescue. The way she had for 30 years. Daniel looked at the floor. What happened in my kitchen in the next few minutes is the reason I tell this story at all, so I'll go slowly. Daniel raised his head, and my husband, the snooze button, the empty pockets, the 6-year reflex, walked past his weeping mother to the tablet and scrolled the footage log with his thumb, entry after entry after entry, all the way back to April, the month he swore the key came home. Then he turned around and in a voice I'd never heard him use with her, low and level and final, he said, "Give me the key, Mom. Put it on the table and get out of this house." She gasped his name. He didn't blink. The key hit my kitchen table with a small sound, ribbon and all, and honest to God I felt the house change owners. And then Daniel turned to me and fell apart, and everything I had begged for across 6 years came pouring out of him at once, 10 minutes too late, and completely sincere. He'd changed the locks today, closed the account today. Therapy. His own. Weekly. Starting Monday. His mother would never set foot in our house again. He would drive to the police station himself and back up every word of my report. Choose me. He was choosing me. He actually knelt down, this big man, next to my kitchen table with his mother frozen by the counter, and slid the petition away from me an inch, and said, "Please. And I want you to understand." I believed him. That's the part that still catches in my throat. He meant every word, and it was everything I had wanted. Served hot. Right on time for the version of me who no longer lived here. I looked at the petition. There was one signature line still blank, the one Karen left for a final read. And I picked up the pen off the table, and I signed it, and slid the papers back across to him. Finished. The police report stays, I told him gently, because gently was all I had left. Not to punish her. Because it's true, and I'm done being the only person in this family who keeps track of what's true. He said, so quietly. I finally know the answer, Barb. I was supposed to protect my wife. Yes, I said. You were. And because he deserved the whole ledger, I gave him the last line in it. Proof doesn't make people love you. It just tells you when to stop trying. The doorbell rang while Lorraine was still standing at my counter, upright and regal in the ruins, and it was Susan, come up from Columbus. She told me later she'd left that morning, sick with the feeling after a week of the aunt's phone calls, and Daniel's text from the truck. Some version of it's all falling apart, had reached her when she was already past Springfield. She took in the kitchen in one long look, the bags, the papers, her brother on his feet now and wrecked, her mother arranging her face for the next audience. Susan didn't ask a single question. She just said, "Come on, Mom, I'll take you home," and steered her out by the elbow, and Lorraine went, because a performance is nothing without an usher. At the door, my mother-in-law turned back for her exit line, chin high. "She'll come back," she announced to her son. "They always come back. Nobody walks away from family." She said it like a curse and believed it like a law, and I almost admired it. The rules had eaten her whole life, and she would go down defending them. The sedan pulled out. The house went quiet the way a house goes quiet after inventory. Everything counted. Nothing left on the shelves. I went upstairs and brought down the 2 suitcases I'd packed across those quiet weeks, and Daniel watched me do it, crying without any noise, and didn't try to stop me, which I will always count in his favor. I set my house key, my own, no ribbon, on the table next to the teapot I'd never poured. I picked up the gray box under one arm, and I walked out of the house I had sanded on my knees, with 2 suitcases and a lockbox. And I want to tell you exactly how that felt, because nobody warns you. It was the richest I have ever felt in my life. Here's the accounting, because you know I did the accounting. The bank's investigation closed in my favor before the leaves finished turning, and every disputed dollar found its way back to the joint account through the restitution order. Nearly $1,400 in all. The prosecutor's office had offered Lorraine a diversion program, which I did not fight. Restitution, paid in full, a financial crimes class on Tuesday nights, and a clean record if she behaved, which she managed, because image was the one debt Lorraine always serviced on time. She never apologized. She tells the church ladies I entrapped her, which, given that my trap consisted of a doorbell camera and a phone number printed on the back of a card, is the closest she's ever come to calling me clever. My attorney filed for a civil protection order after a documented pattern of unwanted entries. A magistrate granted a temporary one within the week, and at the full hearing I said only true things in a level voice for 11 minutes, and it held through the divorce. And the divorce itself? Daniel didn't contest it. Not the filing, not the terms, not the house, which we sold that winter to a young couple who cried in the driveway. Good tears, the kind that house deserved. We split the proceeds down the middle, to the penny. My half became a small apartment with a bright kitchen, a 15-minute walk from my office, with one key, held by one person. Karen called the whole thing the smoothest file on her desk that year. He signed everything like a man paying a bill he knew was overdue, she said. In my business, we call that an account closed in good standing. It was the only gift he had left to give me, and he gave it clean. A year went by. My first bank statement in the new apartment was the most boring document I have ever read, and I framed the feeling if not the paper. Every line mine, every dollar accounted for, nothing moving in the dark. I sleep with the windows cracked now. Nobody rearranges my mugs. Last month, a letter came, handwritten, because even at the end, Daniel knew me. I'm a woman who trusts paper. He's in therapy every week, he wrote, going on 10 months. He and his mother speak on Sundays on the phone for 1 hour, and he sees her at holidays in public places, and when she starts in on the old scripts he says, "Mom, I'm going to hang up now." And then, this is the part I read twice. He actually hangs up. He wrote, "You'll laugh. I finally figured out what I was supposed to do." He isn't asking me back. He knows better, and says so, and that might be the most grown-up sentence in the letter. He just wanted me to know that the work was real, and that he was sorry in the specific ways, itemized, like a man who'd finally learned to read a statement. I sat with that letter for a long evening, and I'm not going to dress this up for you. I loved him. And some ledgers you close with a steady hand and a sore heart, and both of those things are true at once. Then I filed the letter in the gray box, which lives on a shelf now, retired. Cleaning out my last moving carton that same week, I found a spare key to the old house. I mailed it to him in a plain envelope, no note, paid in full. People ask me sometimes, women at work, a cousin, once a stranger in a comment section, how I knew it was time to go, and I only have one answer. If you have to keep a file to be believed in your own home, the file was never the problem. And the day you stop pleading your case is the day you finally get to rest. Lorraine still believes nobody walks away from family. She's right. In a way she'll never understand. I didn't walk away from family. I walked toward it. Family is whoever doesn't need exhibits. Susan calls me every couple of weeks. My mother is coming around slowly, one careful conversation at a time, and last visit she asked me, quietly, how a person opens an account in just her own name. So that's my story. One red ribbon key, one gray box, one signature I didn't take back. If this story reminded you to put your own name on your own account, take that as a sign, and do it this week, not someday. If someone you love is living in a house that isn't really theirs, share this video with her. Drop a comment and tell me what you would have done at that kitchen table. Hit subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you in the next one. Be the woman who knows the numbers. Then I lifted the last page, the copy with the case number stamped on it, and read her the line I already knew by heart. Known suspect, it says, Lorraine Anderson. Her tears shut off. I finally got to see the tap turn in person, and she looked at me with the pure, undiluted thing beneath all that sugar, and hissed, "You would do this to family?" And there it was. The door she'd built, held open for me at last. I said, "You were right, Lorraine. I was just who he married. As of today, I'm not even that." Then she turned to her son to collect her rescue. The way she had for 30 years. Daniel looked at the floor. What happened in my kitchen in the next few minutes is the reason I tell this story at all, so I'll go slowly. Daniel raised his head, and my husband, the snooze button, the empty pockets, the 6-year reflex, walked past his weeping mother to the tablet and scrolled the footage log with his thumb, entry after entry after entry, all the way back to April, the month he swore the key came home. Then he turned around, and in a voice I'd never heard him use with her, low and level and final, he said, "Give me the key, Mom. Put it on the table and get out of this house." She gasped his name. He didn't blink. The key hit my kitchen table with a small sound, ribbon and all, and honest to God I felt the house change owners. And then Daniel turned to me and fell apart, and everything I had begged for across 6 years came pouring out of him at once, 10 minutes too late, and completely sincere. He'd change the locks today, close the account today. Therapy. His own. Weekly. Starting Monday. His mother would never set foot in our house again. He would drive to the police station himself and back up every word of my report. Choose me. He was choosing me. He actually knelt down, this big man, next to my kitchen table with his mother frozen by the counter, and slid the petition away from me an inch, and said, "Please. And I want you to understand." I believed him. That's the part that still catches in my throat. He meant every word, and it was everything I had wanted. Served hot. Right on time for the version of me who no longer lived here. I looked at the petition. There was one signature line still blank, the one Karen left for a final read. And I picked up the pen off the table, and I signed it, and slid the papers back across to him. Finished. The police report stays, I told him gently, because gently was all I had left. Not to punish her. Because it's true, and I'm done being the only person in this family who keeps track of what's true, he said, so quietly. I finally know the answer, Barb. I was supposed to protect my wife. Yes, I said. You were. And because he deserved the whole ledger, I gave him the last line in it. Proof doesn't make people love you. It just tells you when to stop trying. The doorbell rang while Lorraine was still standing at my counter, upright and regal in the ruins, and it was Susan, come up from Columbus. She told me later she'd left that morning, sick with the feeling after a week of the aunt's phone calls, and Daniel's text from the truck. Some version of "it's all falling apart" had reached her when she was already past Springfield. She took in the kitchen in one long look. The bags, the papers, her brother on his feet now and wrecked, her mother arranging her face for the next audience. Susan didn't ask a single question. She just said, "Come on, Mom, I'll take you home," and steered her out by the elbow, and Lorraine went, because a performance is nothing without an usher. At the door, my mother-in-law turned back for her exit line, chin high. "She'll come back," she announced to her son. "They always come back. Nobody walks away from family." She said it like a curse and believed it like a law, and I almost admired it. The rules had eaten her whole life, and she would go down defending them. The sedan pulled out. The house went quiet the way a house goes quiet after inventory. Everything counted. Nothing left on the shelves. I went upstairs and brought down the 2 suitcases I'd packed across those quiet weeks, and Daniel watched me do it, crying without any noise, and didn't try to stop me, which I will always count in his favor. I set my house key, my own, no ribbon, on the table next to the teapot I'd never poured. I picked up the gray box under one arm, and I walked out of the house I had sanded on my knees, with 2 suitcases and a lockbox. And I want to tell you exactly how that felt, because nobody warns you. It was the richest I have ever felt in my life. Here's the accounting, because you know I did the accounting. The bank's investigation closed in my favor before the leaves finished turning, and every disputed dollar found its way back to the joint account through the restitution order. Nearly $1,400 in all. The prosecutor's office had offered Lorraine a diversion program, which I did not fight. Restitution, paid in full, a financial crimes class on Tuesday nights, and a clean record if she behaved, which she managed, because image was the one debt Lorraine always serviced on time. She never apologized. She tells the church ladies I entrapped her, which, given that my trap consisted of a doorbell camera and a phone number printed on the back of a card, is the closest she's ever come to calling me clever. My attorney filed for a civil protection order after a documented pattern of unwanted entries. A magistrate granted a temporary one within the week, and at the full hearing I said only true things in a level voice for 11 minutes, and it held through the divorce. And the divorce itself? Daniel didn't contest it. Not the filing, not the terms, not the house, which we sold that winter to a young couple who cried in the driveway. Good tears, the kind that house deserved. We split the proceeds down the middle, to the penny. My half became a small apartment with a bright kitchen, a 15-minute walk from my office, with one key, held by one person. Karen called the whole thing the smoothest file on her desk that year. He signed everything like a man paying a bill he knew was overdue, she said. In my business, we call that an account closed in good standing. It was the only gift he had left to give me, and he gave it clean. A year went by. My first bank statement in the new apartment was the most boring document I have ever read, and I framed the feeling, if not the paper. Every line mine, every dollar accounted for, nothing moving in the dark. I sleep with the windows cracked now. Nobody rearranges my mugs. Last month, a letter came, handwritten, because even at the end, Daniel knew me. I'm a woman who trusts paper. He's in therapy every week, he wrote, going on 10 months. He and his mother speak on Sundays on the phone for 1 hour, and he sees her at holidays in public places, and when she starts in on the old scripts, he says, "Mom, I'm going to hang up now." And then, this is the part I read twice. He actually hangs up. He wrote, "You'll laugh. I finally figured out what I was supposed to do." He isn't asking me back. He knows better, and says so, and that might be the most grown-up sentence in the letter. He just wanted me to know that the work was real, and that he was sorry in the specific ways, itemized, like a man who'd finally learned to read a statement. I sat with that letter for a long evening, and I'm not going to dress this up for you. I loved him. And some ledgers you close with a steady hand and a sore heart, and both of those things are true at once. Then I filed the letter in the gray box, which lives on a shelf now, retired. Cleaning out my last moving carton that same week, I found a spare key to the old house. I mailed it to him in a plain envelope, no note, paid in full. People ask me sometimes, women at work, a cousin, once a stranger in a comment section, how I knew it was time to go, and I only have one answer. If you have to keep a file to be believed in your own home, the file was never the problem. And the day you stop pleading your case is the day you finally get to rest. Lorraine still believes nobody walks away from family. She's right. In a way she'll never understand. I didn't walk away from family. I walked toward it. Family is whoever doesn't need exhibits. Susan calls me every couple of weeks. My mother is coming around slowly, one careful conversation at a time, and last visit she asked me, quietly, how a person opens an account in just her own name. So that's my story. One red ribbon key, one gray box, one signature I didn't take back. If this story reminded you to put your own name on your own account, take that as a sign, and do it this week, not someday. If someone you love is living in a house that isn't really theirs, share this video with her. Drop a comment and tell me what you would have done at that kitchen table. Hit subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you in the next one.